everybody? It's your boy Pitts, Pitt Sports Zone, Bowie TV, coming to you live. Listen, it's going down, all things HBCUs. And who else better to start it off with them Bowie State Bulldogs? We coming to you, Bowie State Bulldogs, total access. We got the Morgan State Bears. Listen, all HBCUs information, all HBCU news, sporting events, updates. You get it live here with Pitt Sports Zone, Bowie TV, Comcast Channel 77. Verizon Channel 11 is going down. Don't you miss a beat. Listen, it's only the beginning because it's early still. And we're going to be here all day. All day. What's going on, everybody? Y'all know what it is. It's your boy Pitts, Pitts and Push Sports Talk Radio, Pitt Sports Zone. It's going down. Listen, he's not a familiar face, but he's definitely new to this segment. We got the great Coach Antone Sewell, Morgan State University defensive coordinator. What it do?
What's going on, big dog?
What's going on, my guy?
Nothing much, man. Nothing much. Happy to be here.
Appreciate you. Go ahead, take us away, Sydney.
Okay, today we have the pleasure of speaking with Coach Antone Sewell, the assistant head coach and defensive coordinator for the Morgan State Bears. Coach Sewell is a defensive mastermind with over 2 decades of experience developing winning programs and championship caliber athletes. Before joining Morgan, he built one of the most dominant defenses in Division II football at Bowie State University, helping lead the Bulldogs to 3 straight CIAA championships. He also gained valuable NFL coaching experience through the prestigious Bill Walsh Diversity Coaching Fellowship with the Baltimore Ravens. As a former standout player himself and now a respected leader on the sidelines, Coach Sewell has dedicated his career to building not only strong athletes, but also strong men on and off the field. Coach, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to dive into your journey and your insights.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And my guys, you ain't never give me an introduction like that before, bro. Normally when we do interviews, we just set up the camera and you start asking questions. So that's a good pickup on your part, man. Good talent acquisition.
Hey, listen, I ain't about to take the credit for it. He ran it past me, man. And then, the first one she did was with NFL Network, Steve Weiss. Oh my goodness. Okay. It was on.
Oh, that's good stuff, though. That's good stuff. I appreciate you guys having me on this evening.
Thank you.
Tom, what's going on, man? Listen, the season is here. It's here. South Alabama, Saturday.
Yes, sir.
What are you feeling?
I feel good. I feel like we had a really good training camp as we roll into the first day of school starts tomorrow. So we've actually had a couple of extra days of just football before the guys have to, really get into the grind of football and class and, workouts and weights kind of all combined in one. But I think we were able to get a lot accomplished over this time. We lost a lot of guys last year. So, had an opportunity to really spend a lot of time with, their quote unquote replacements, the new guys that we added to the fold this year, both defensively as well as offensively. So I think guys are starting to gel. We've, kind of had some ups and downs, which is to be expected during training camp, but I think we headed in the right direction. So I'm really looking forward to seeing, just how we go out and compete this upcoming weekend.
Absolutely.
Well, Coach, can you share a little bit about your journey from becoming a player, from being a player at Bowie State University to now becoming a coach at Morgan State?
It's been a long journey, but not a whole lot of stops along the way. Pretty much everywhere I've been with familiar faces. Obviously now Coach Wilson being our head coach at Bowie, he was someone who I was a student actually with at Bowie. I was a young guy when he was a senior. So once I started playing ball, he was actually one of the coaches for the football team. So my first year playing and his first year coaching, coincided. And from there, Once I graduated, went to coach at Fort Valley State with John Morgan, who was my defensive coordinator the last 2 years at Bowie. From there, came back, had a quick stop back at Bowie as a volunteer for a year, then followed my college head coach, Henry Frazier, down to Prairie View A&M. Was, help turn that thing around and win a championship there. Came back to Bowie and, as you mentioned earlier, kind of finished there on a very high note, winning those 3 straight CIAA championships. Had another quick pit stop at Alabama State University during spring of 2022. Definitely appreciate Coach Eddie Robinson for giving me an opportunity, as a Division II coordinator to have an opportunity to jump up to the Division I FCS level and still be a coordinator is something that, I don't, I understand doesn't happen too often. But obviously when Coach Wilson took the job at Morgan, having the opportunity to be back here, closer to home and everything, and still have that same opportunity to be a Division I defensive coordinator, was kind of something I felt like I couldn't pass up. So had the opportunity to come back here and still trying to get this thing turned around to the point where we can be consistently competing at a championship level as well. But like I said, we've been close. I want to say we finished third in the MEAC the last 2 years. They have us picked to finish third again this year, but obviously we're hoping to exceed some of those expectations, and then we have a good enough team to get some things done this upcoming season.
Absolutely. Coach, you've been around championship level defenses. What excites you most about the Morgan State team heading into the 2025 season?
I think that as I told the guys when we first walked in, we're going to look a lot different than we have in the past. We've made a concerted effort to get, kind of bigger, faster, and stronger at a lot of positions. I think we've always kind of had, a standout guy here and there, or a guy that you look at and say, hey, he's what it looks like. But I think now we've done a good job of kind of, getting more prototypical guys in, and that allows us to do some different things because we don't necessarily have to scheme up, guys to be in position to be successful. Some of those guys just, as long as they're in the right place, their athletic ability will allow them to do some special things, I believe. So it's just a matter of everybody getting comfortable with each other. When we get out there on Saturday and things start to go a lot faster than they have been in practice, I'm interested to see, kind of how those guys gel together and able to fight through a little bit of adversity. But I think once we come out from that and they realize that we're gonna be okay, I think that the future for this defense is definitely very bright.
Absolutely.
What's the most important quality you look for in a defensive player?
Ooh, that's a great question. That's a debate we have often in our office. I wasn't a guy who had great measurables. I think I was probably good height wise, but wasn't the biggest. Didn't weigh the most, wasn't the strongest or the fastest. So intangibles were something that really helped me get over the hump as a player. So for me, I would just say it's hard to say the most important, but I would say one of the most important things is just just having that mindset. Having the mindset and being determined. Being determined and focused and disciplined, just to make sure that hey, understanding that I have a job to do and my teammates are relying on me, and I'm not going to stop until I reach the point where I can be someone who's reliable and dependable for my teammates.
Absolutely. How have you seen the defense develop during camp, and what area do you feel most confident about?
I think that I've seen those guys come together, and I think the communication amongst the players has been the biggest growth that we've made throughout camp. Just guys getting comfortable within the scheme and allowing their voices to kind of resonate throughout the group. But a lot of that comes from just that level of comfort growing. We know we have a few older guys in the room, but just trying to get those younger guys to understand that, hey, we need them to be on the same page with the older guys in terms of understanding the scheme and making the correct calls and those kind of things. If I had to say one strength of our defense, it will probably be our linebacker core, just because we have probably the most experienced players returning at that group. We have 3 seniors in that group, and that's obviously that's actually by far the most seniors we have out of any position group. But not only are they seniors, those guys are experienced players as well. We were actually talking earlier where we're not necessarily a young team, but we don't have a lot of guys that have a lot of Division I experience and definitely not playing together. I think that group probably has the most experienced guys on our defense. So we're definitely relying on those guys heavily to lead us in the direction we're trying to go to.
Absolutely.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge you faced during your coaching career, and how did you overcome that challenge?
The biggest challenge. That's a good one. I don't really want to say anything on the field. I would probably say the biggest challenge that I've had to face is just kind of just being an unproven guy. When I first got the job at Bowie, I was 29 years old. Coach Wilson obviously knew what he was getting and who he was hiring, but nobody else really knew that. I followed a guy in Durante Jones, who was a Morgan State alum. Actually, he's now the assistant defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. He was the defensive coordinator at Bowie State prior to me taking over, and they were coming off a season of being the number one defense in the country. So, getting hired as a guy who had never been a coordinator before, following behind that and inheriting a group of, I want to say, 9 returning starters. It was one of those things where, hey, everybody was kind of looking at me like, what are you going to do to kind of follow that up? Right. And the mistake I made early on was, kind of being apologetic and trying to, get those guys to not doing a good enough job of getting those guys to kind of put the past in the past and trying to live up to, what they had done. But once I found my own identity and, kind of got on solid, got my feet on solid ground, we ended up having a lot of success. And, I would say, throughout the time there, I think I did a good job of solidifying myself as a, pretty good coach and, putting some pretty good defenses on the field as well.
Absolutely. For sure. As you stated earlier, you guys have ranked defensively nationally consecutively, and I shared that before, is that, the standard is the standard when it comes to your defense. And, when you lose somebody like Elijah, as great and as dominant as he is, your expectation is that whoever that is replacing him, gives that same output. It's the same demeanor. And we've seen that over time with your defense. You had Toles at safety, and you had Knock at corner. That defense was, you had a lot of standout, but they played together as a unit so well, that whenever there was a mistake, it was always overshadowed because they played together as a unit, so they were able to mask those areas that normally where other teams will get exposed from. So my next question, Coach, I want to go ahead and move to South Alabama. South Alabama has a reputation for speed and balance on offense. What stands out to you about their scheme and their offense?
Their speed and their balance. Not to be funny, but they're a very fast team. They do a lot schematically to get the ball into the hands of their playmakers. One of the first things I noticed in watching them, going back and watching some of their games and kind of watching the live broadcast of some of their games is you hear the commentators talk about how great they were after contact. So you talk about the speed, but those guys have some very, very powerful runners. They will run the ball down your throat if you allow them to, so it's going to be important that early on that we're able to stand up and not necessarily stop the run, because, you don't stop a team from running the ball who runs the ball as well as they do, but to be able to make them earn everything that they get. It's important that, we're disciplined and we don't create a lot of big explosive plays for them early on, or if they do, it has to be, hey, there, a guy breaks 3 or 4 tackles and runs for a long way, or a guy goes up and just out jumps somebody for the ball. It can't be blown coverages and guys running free in the secondary. It can't be allowing the quarterback to get on the perimeter and make plays with his legs. It can't be guys out of their gaps and allowing the running back to have untouched, plays for long gains. Like I tell our guys all the time, man, when you're going to face a FBS opponent, regardless of who it is, the biggest thing for us is we got to go in there and compete and just kind of let the chips fall where they may. Never going into it with the mindset of, hey, we're going to lose or we're expecting to lose. We understand we're underdogs. We understand that the quote unquote odds are against us, but we're gonna go in there and give it our best shot. And we've been competitive with some teams who were expected to I guess blow us out or to kind of do whatever. But we don't go into it with that mindset of, hey, it's not David against Goliath, or it's not hey, we're trying to shock the world. We just want to go out and compete. We want to go out and compete and put our best foot forward. And that's really against anybody who we play. And I tell our guys all the time, if we go out and we take our shot and we hit them with all we got, and they still come out victorious at the end of the day, we'll shake their hands and get ready for the next one.
Yes.
Well, as a Bulldog myself, I got to ask you about your time at Bowie State. You built one of the most dominant defenses in Division II. What do you think was the key to that success?
Just buy-in. One of the things that Pitts asked that I was waiting for him to finish because I actually want to correct is we don't talk about expectations. We do talk about the standard. And, as we explain to our guys all the time, like when you have a standard, that doesn't change, So one of the things that we talked about at Bowie is, tradition doesn't graduate. Bowie State's defense was great long before I became the coach there. The defense I played on at Bowie State was, top 5 ranked in the country in total defense. And that was 20 plus years ago. So, as you walk through those doors, you kind of knew. And if you ask throughout the conference, people would always talk about Bowie State defense. So the biggest thing for us was just having those guys understand, hey, you're a part of something that's bigger than you. And we're not going to allow you or anybody else to come in here and change what our standard is. That's something that we established very early on at Morgan. And it was kind of, it was weird saying it because, you talk about a standard to a group of guys who hadn't really had success. So it's almost like they're looking at you like, well, what do you mean we have a standard? Like we haven't done or won anything, but it's like, okay, like, my head coach when I was at Prairie View, Henry Fraser, who's the head coach at Virginia State University now, he would always tell us as coaches at Prairie View, he would say, you got to fake it till you make it. So it's like sometimes you have to act like you're something that you're not because that's what you actually want to be. So just get our guys like, hey, like sometimes you have to believe it before it actually even happens. And then when it starts to happen, then they're looking at you like, damn, well, coach did tell us this was gonna happen.
Right.
Now you and now you get that credibility. It's because it's not like they don't look at it like, well, nobody expected this to happen. They're like, well, our coaches told us this was going to happen. Now their antennas are up and they start to listen a little bit more. And from there, it just becomes a habit. It's a little more difficult now in this transfer portal era because the faces are constantly changing. But one of the things that we established very, very, very early on is, hey, it doesn't matter who's in those seats. Whoever is in those seats, this is what our standard is. And these are the things that are our non-negotiables. And if we do these things, we'll have success regardless of who's in this room.
Absolutely. Hey, and so he ain't want to tell y'all when he said, when he played and he said 20 plus years ago, I was spill the beans. It was 25 years ago.
Yeah, well
so I'm sorry. Well, 25 for me because he was a senior when I was a freshman at Bowie in 2000. So for him, it's earlier than that.
Well, you got all the gray though. You got the gray. I don't have no gray yet.
You rogated it.
No.
I've seen some black dye in your belly.
I
swear.
Hey, listen, I just got my first haircut since we started camp, and I got a couple popping in over here.
See. So, hey, coach. So, in season, right? So, In these early season games, execution is huge. What's one thing you'll be watching closely from your unit in the first quarter?
Just our run fits. Our run fits, making sure that we maintain our gap integrity. I really like our depth up front on the defensive line. We don't have that one standout guy. I would be remiss not to acknowledge. I mean, big shout out to Elijah, who just, we just found out today that he actually did make the Minnesota Vikings 53-man roster for the season. So yeah, no doubt, no doubt. That's definitely
Yeah.
a major accomplishment for him, as well as our
Yeah.
program. But for the last 4 years, everybody knows when you come into the game, you got to find zero. And even with him being the focal point of our defense, he still was able to kind of wreak havoc. I mean, to the point of almost taking over certain games. I can remember us going to play Akron a few years ago, and he just absolutely just took over the game at times. Versus some really top caliber opponents. So in my opinion, we don't have that one guy up front. But I think we probably got about 10 to 12 guys on the defense in that defensive line room who at any given time can, make some big plays for us. So I think it's just going to be, very important that those guys play within themselves and, understand what their strengths are and, play to their strengths. Our job is to put them in position to be successful. But obviously, once the ball is snapped, I want to see, are we going to be able to, hold the line of scrimmage or possibly create a new line of scrimmage and, like I said, give those linebackers that we have an opportunity to run and, make some plays at the line of scrimmage or in the backfield. And, on the back end, just making sure that, we're all on the same page. We don't have one returning starter from a secondary standpoint. Everybody who played, those last few games of the year, are all gone. So the only guy that actually, Jaden Carter is a guy who probably has the most starts from last year coming back. But we've kind of moved him around and have him doing some different things in our secondary than what he's done in the past. So it's just interesting to see just kind of how things gel together. We know that we're going down there and South Alabama is going to try to come out and hit us with their best shot early on, and we've got to be able to withstand it and still come back swinging.
Man, so before Sydney, I want to say, that's big ups, Elijah.
For sure.
Morgan State
Yeah.
sack leader. He broke the record last year. And it's just wild because when we talk HBCU athletics, when we talk exposure, when we talk, all we need is a chance, right?
Right.
All we need is a chance.
Absolutely.
And I say it all the time, give HBCUs the same funding that you give a Power Five, and watch the tables turn. And
Sure.
you talk about a young man who not only did it the right way on the field, he was exemplary off the field. He's
Indeed.
a stand-up guy, man. And I definitely enjoyed him over the years. He don't say much, but when he on that field, you understand and you got to recognize and be aware of where he is. And then lastly, Jaden also, he made one of their players. You had many players who made, first team MEAC defense. This year, Jaden being one of them along with Eric Hunter. And Jaden to me is a selfless player. He does whatever you ask him to do. And the fact, when you say you're going to move him around, I can see that, given that, he has a wide range of ability. And he is one of the watch lists for the Aeneas Williams Award, too, at the end of the year. So big ups to Jaden and the defense, because you said the D-line, you got Big Chris, who came from the offensive side to the defensive side, and then my man Juwop and a host of others. So I'm definitely anxious to see. I'm really definitely anxious to see Chris. Right, I just want to see that transition from the O line to the D line, and his attraction with it. I'm excited for that. That's a new addition that I am looking forward to this year.
For sure, yeah. I mean, like I said, I think sometimes you can, we've seen somewhat of almost like a fresh start for Chris. I said even though he was in our program, moving from the offense to the defense, it's been like kind of a renewed sense of urgency for him.
Yeah.
So we're expecting him definitely to contribute for us. On that side of the ball, he's done a great job of, I think he's probably dropped probably 30 pounds since the spring.
Look
Um,
good.
he's still a big boy, but he's not as big as he was, and
Yeah.
has the ability to move around a little better than he was previously. So, he's a guy. Like I said, I think we've got a nice rotation of guys. Both inside and outside on that D line room. Like I said, some older guys and some younger or less experienced guys kind of mixed in with them. So then we have a chance to to do something special. We just gotta put it together quickly. Like I said, we don't have a we don't have a a cupcake or gimme game. Kind of to get our feet wet. We got to jump right into the fire. But
Yeah.
if I'm a player, I can't ask for anything more. You get to go to the deep south on a Saturday night, opening week, playing in Mobile, Alabama. So, before, for some of our older guys, hopefully they're hoping that they can be back down there, playing in one of those all-star games in the off season. So kind of get the, get the feeling of what really, really big time college football is like right out the break.
Absolutely.
Well, you participated in the Bill Walsh Diversity Coaching Fellowship with the Baltimore Ravens. What was that experience like, and what lessons did you bring to Morgan State?
It was a great experience for me personally. As I told people immediately after participating in that program with the Baltimore Ravens, I could see very easily why they're consistently one of the top teams in the NFL. First class organization. You know, John Harbaugh, he's probably the exact opposite of what you expect when you think of an NFL coach. I mean, there were times where he'd sit down and and have lunch with me, and I'm like I said, I'm just me and some of the other interns at the table. He just pull up and have his lunch and kind of chit chat with us and ask us how our experience was, and open his doors to us, and if we needed anything or had any questions. So for me, it was a great experience. Got an opportunity to work with the linebackers and Zach, who's now been promoted to the defensive coordinator. Yeah, so he and I were able to kind of build a connection and bond during that time. So from that, I just learned that there are more than one way to be successful.
Yeah.
At that level, like I said, because one, like to me, John Harbaugh, he's more of a lead with love kind of guy versus just being that hard nosed, business guy that you think of when you think of NFL head coaches. And like I said, getting an opportunity to work with Zach, who was just kind of a few years removed from being on the field, and seeing his ascension, it gives someone like myself who's been doing this for a long time, still kind of, gives me that hope that, hey, there's still, opportunities for growth and, and advancement within this professional. And also, again, when you talk about defense, you can't talk about defense in the NFL without talking about the Baltimore Ravens. So, I was able to, hey, I'm sorry, listen, at least Bowie is black and gold. So, but I was able to kind of two things that I learned from a football standpoint is, for one, a lot of the things that we're doing is kind of on par, which allows guys like Elijah to go to the NFL level and have an opportunity to be successful. So it showed me that we are doing a good job preparing our guys for those opportunities on the next level. And also I was able to take some of what they're doing and be able to implement that into what we do defensively. Just from a pressure standpoint, and some of their stunts and games that they do with their D line. We were able to kind of bring some of that stuff back and apply it to what we do to just kind of enhance what we already had from a defensive package standpoint.
Absolutely. Hey man, y'all know. Listen, you ain't have to You know, I
But
get it. You know,
but I didn't say. See, I can
I,
give
I,
somebody a
I,
compliment
I know.
without insulting your
I know
team.
it was
You can't take that
underhanded.
personally.
It was
No, it
underhanded.
wasn't. It wasn't. It was not. It definitely was not. You guys have a tradition of having great defenses as well. So I just didn't, tell Mike Tomlin to hire me to give me an internship, and I'll talk good about your team
Hey,
too.
listen, Mike. I would love to listen, but I got you. I understand now, man. But I definitely appreciate you, man. It's always love.
For
I'll
sure.
see you early in the morning tomorrow.
Okay.
Definitely come out for practice in the morning, man. But another night, Morgan State University defensive coordinator, Coach Antone Sewell. And we appreciate your time and insight tonight. Best of luck to you and the Morgan State Bears as you open the season this Saturday against South Alabama. We'll be keeping a close eye on the defense and the journey ahead this year. Thanks again. You guys, join the Picks and Push Sports Talk Radio. You know what it is.